to PCB Chat. I'm Andy Shaughnessy, Content Architect with Printed Circuit Engineering Association. Joining me today is Nemanja Jokanovic, Executive Leader at Breadboard, which is a platform used by EMS providers and some OEMs right now to streamline the BOM quoting process. How are you doing, Nemanja?
Thanks, Andy. Doing great. Thanks for having me over.
I've been taking a peep at the whole breadboard operation, and it's really interesting. Give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, absolutely. Moved to the U.S. Very short story. When I was 18 years old for college, played D1 sports here in the U.S. Got into the industry at a pretty young age. The only industry I've ever been in. Worked my way through a couple of areas. Started in publishing. And advertising, transitioned over to distribution. Really wanted to learn every angle of this industry. Realized there was a big gap in how people search for electronic components, look into the good old catalogs of distributors, hence the term catalog distributors. And around that time, digital world was really evolving, and companies predominantly in digital space really started to grow. That's where joining Octopart was one of the fantastic ideas, and had a blast. We're building a company that today is recognized as one of the largest traffic generators in the world when it comes to search of electronic components. Transitioning obviously into Altium, spent years in building the Altium Enterprise organization. Grew that to become one of the most recognizable enterprise divisions in EDA space in terms of how people design hardware, transitioning from prem solutions onto cloud, hence the birth of Altium 365 today, people recognizing. And then in August of 2024, Altium closed the acquisition by Renesas Electronics, and today that is recognized all over the world as transitioning into Altium 365 and then Renesas 365, beyond PCB level design electronics, more into modular and subsystem and system level electronic development. So I think the team, there's still a lot of my friends out there, and I think they're doing a fantastic job of evolving how electronics are being democratized in terms of electronic development itself.
Right, democratize. That's a good way to put it. So now you're with Breadboard. Why don't you walk us through Breadboard and tell us, what are some of the biggest bottlenecks at BOM quoting?
Right. I think you're bringing up a really valuable point, and this is what made me particularly interested to start. I was a builder. I always been inspired on helping processes become more efficient. And one of the gaps we realized early on that there's a lot of development being done in how OEMs are evolving in terms of technology, not so much the good old manufacturer and EMS organizations. And that process really in terms of digitizing, I call it the democratization of electronic development in general, whether that's design or production. And I think continuing to democratize development and production of electronics had a little bit of a gap when it comes to manufacturing. People were still quoting, receiving the bill of materials, Gerber files, production materials, and still trying to do that process through spreadsheets, through reviewing manual documentation, taking weeks, really to get back to their OEM partners. The communication between distribution and EMS took days, and also then the communication between OEM and EMS was really broken. And the moment you break that chain of communication, it always reduces the efficiency. Every email today could have been avoided. And I think there's still, while we've made as an industry, while we made some improvements in terms of how channel, as in distributors, are communicating with EMS companies, a lot of that being attributed to APIs, has improved tremendously. With development of artificial intelligence, which we can talk about and how we utilize it at Breadboard. has really improved the quoting process and extracting quotations from PDFs or spreadsheets. But I still think there's a big gap in terms of how OEMs and EMSs communicate for that full thread of continuity of communication per se, right? And that's where I see missing gaps, which made me so excited to step into the EMS arena after many years of playing in the channel with distribution, with component manufacturers, semiconductor companies, right, and with OEMs. So I think kind of my next challenge that makes me personally very excited is really stepping into the EMS arena and helping digitize the industry here.
And now a word from our sponsor. Join the electronics design and manufacturing industry at PCB East 2026, coming April 28th to May 1st to the DCU Center in Worcester, Massachusetts. Sponsored by the Printed Circuit Engineering Association, PCB East features more than 120 hours of expert electronics design, manufacturing, and assembly training. The annual one-day exhibition will be held April 29th and features major semiconductor companies such as AMD, Altera, Lattice Semiconductor, Microchip, and Samtec, along with leading software developers and manufacturers. Registration for the conference and exhibition is now open. Be sure to book your spot. For more information about PCB East, visit pcbeast.com.
What are you guys doing different?
I think we can argue in terms of how many rivals are out there. I think with development of artificial intelligence per se, and in general automation, there are a couple of companies that have done this, over the past decade. What I think Breadboard really comes as a disruptor, an innovator. People can say, the way I like to use an analogy is simply, if there's already an existing Microsoft out there, we're definitely an Apple. Kind of in a context of how Breadboard is positioning itself and why we have grown over the past couple of years drastically is because two particular things. One is ease of use. When an EMS onboards on Breadboard, it's extremely easy to use. It's very intuitive, pretty self-explanatory. And then second of all is speed. It's really fast. It's really customizable, not just in terms of quoting, but in terms of customization when it comes to putting labor outputs out or calculation of production, attrition.
Right.
And for an EMS organization to produce a quote and return that quote back to the OEM, especially in North American market, speed is everything. So the faster they are in producing their quote, the higher really the chance of them is winning some of those bids and additional business. So where Breadboard comes in handy is really enhancing on that value of being fast and intuitive. When people sign on to join Breadboard as a platform, they're up and running within 2 weeks or less.
Right.
And we have a very strict onboarding and training process, but we're continuing to evolve, releasing new products that we strictly release with customers' feedback. We probably interview over a dozen of our customers before we release any new major developments. So everything our EMS partners need comes in with their feedback in terms of how we're releasing new products. But yeah, where Breadboard comes in, you think of it as a platform that's really helping you automate your manual workflow. And that being said, and beyond that, really, today, I think people follow processes. Where Breadboard is going to be enhancing is we want Breadboard to actually start doing some work in the background for you. Without you, and just asking you to verify, approve, or reject certain things.
Right.
But as it is today, people come to Breadboard, they upload their bill of material. It can be in any format, really. It doesn't have to be in a specific structure. Uploading that bill of material, whether it's a spreadsheet, a PDF, we can take any of the formats. Breadboard will scan that bill of material, import all of it in with some quick mapping. You push submit. We're going to make API calls to over 200 distributor partners we have, pull the best pricing and availability from the market, and allow our EMS partners to quickly allocate those bids to the best possible offer that's in the market is really one portion, and then, we do all kinds of other things like integration of custom pricing, contractual pricing, taking it kind of really a step further beyond the traditional search engine. But then the second portion of that automation really needs to be to complete the quote and getting a bill of material cost that is really 50% of the job. The other 50% of the job is understanding how much it's going to cost me to produce or assemble a board.
Right.
And this is where those customizable labor modules, calculating tariff, because a lot of EMSs today win business not necessarily on cost or cost at BOM, but rather on how they do their labor, how efficiently they manufacture and assemble their product. And this is where Breadboard comes in to fulfill that other 50% of the board and make sure that, or the job, and make sure that the job is efficient.
Because it was just built in that it was going to be slow, right? The quoting.
Right. And we're trying today to do that. Breadboard's going to be really headed. 2026, I believe, is a transformational year in terms of development. As I mentioned, there have been some traditional legacy platforms that are out there for quoting. But I think that the way we are going to be approaching not just communication between EMS to distributor, I think Breadboard is really going to start to evolve into if today you call it a platform, I'm going to call it a supply chain system level management, where we're going to step in and really try to manage the whole workflow from OEM all the way to distributor and back.
Right. One of the things on your website, you say that sometimes you can get like 80% of the BOM can be processed almost automatically. And that, I mean, how do you get speeds like that? I mean, is it?
Yeah, and this is, I think, where the power of engineering comes into play. How we architect the platform. It's a combination of user interface and interaction with APIs. When you upload that bill of material to Breadboard and you push a button, within 10 to 15 seconds, we can return information from over 200 distributors.
Right.
And tell you exactly, and not just tell you what the web price is, what your contractual pricing is for comparison. And then we also step into negotiation automation, where we can no more email, where you can, with the click of a button, select a couple of distributors you work with, you have approved on your vendor list, and with the click of a button, you can send them a message to quote something out, and then when they respond, our artificial intelligence will extract that information and pull it back.
It looks like right now you're primarily working with the EMS companies in North America, but you have plans to expand?
We are definitely expanding and growing on a global level. For us, particularly two interesting markets that we've seen and have received a lot of demand from India and Israel.
Right.
So we're gonna be stepping there. We're also seeing some demand in EMEA. So Breadboard's coming for sure. Most of our business today has been done in North America. We definitely have big plans of growing in the India market as well as EMEA. So within the next couple of months, we already have 3 or 4 partnerships coming in the next month or so.
And primarily EMS, but you've got some OEMs, like I see TI is listed there. I think getting more into OEMs and designers, or
not so much the design world. I think where Breadboard is going to step and really has there are 2 particular domains that we have received a lot of demand from. Our platform was architected in a way that's very friendly for Department of Defense organizations. we have seen a lot of companies come to us, particularly requesting a lot of companies supporting the DoD. And reason for that is, we architected the platform to be very secure. Mm-hmm. So from security standpoint, in terms of how information is sitting in a siloed environment, communication, there's no attachment, there's only very secure links that are that can expire. So we've seen a lot of people coming to us who are subject to CMMC 2 levels, so a lot of FedRAMP type of conversations we stepped into recently. And then the second area, to your point, is the OEM, but automating the supply chain portion of OEM. So one of the things we've seen recently is companies coming to us and say, hey, can you help us with supply chain data? Meaning we want to know REACH, EU, RoHS, REACH, life cycle, historical life cycles of components, all of the information that will make sure their BOM is healthy.
Right.
And then when it comes to submitting, let's say the work is done in one of the CAD tools, and now the bill of material is ready for export and maybe prototype. That's the area where Breadboard is really going to step in, given the current demand, and help communication between the OEM and the EMS. So we're going to try to help them both communicate better, while also providing some information around health of their bill of material at the design stage.
It seems like half the problems we run into are just caused by a lack of communication between parts of the chain that were used to be in the same building before, but now.
Yes, and you think about how RFQs today are submitted. Mm-hmm. There are two ways, really. One is, hey, here's my 5 EMSs. If I'm an OEM, here's my 5 EMSs I work with, and I'm going to now send individual emails with the build request to those 5 EMSs, and then hopefully I'll hear back in the next week. Mm-hmm. Or the second way to do this is a portal. And do you really need another portal?
Right.
Let me submit this RFQ in a portal. I think the level of technology today allows us to avoid those two steps. And there's a big gap in there in terms of how efficiency can be achieved. And this is where we want to help that communication between OEM and EMS as well.
Is there anything we haven't covered?
We're happy to have conversations with a lot of EMSs. We're happy to answer any questions. We are going to be exhibiting a lot more. And Breadboard name is going to be out there. We're going to be at PCB East, PCB West. We're going to have our booth. So if you're in the EMS space, we would be happy to take on any conversations and showcase some of the coolest technologies that we're coming up with. But when it comes to quoting, to producing a effective, healthy bill of material, this is what Breadboard's for. So we're happy to have any conversations.
Well, I look forward to meeting you at PCB East, which is just around the corner. So, and where are you based out of?
Likewise, I'm very excited to be in New England and meet with all the partners. I'm based out of Austin, Texas, personally. We're becoming a little tech mecca here, and conversations are really productive. There's actually a lot of communication and a lot of production kind of coming to Austin. There's some EMSs popping up here, so it's a great place to be and evolve technology. A lot of good talent, tech savvy environment, and we're happy to personally myself be out of Austin, but our team is located across the U.S.
All right. Thanks for speaking with me, and I look forward to meeting you.
Likewise. Thank you, Andy, for having me, and we'll see you at the PCB East.
I'm Andy Shaughnessy for PCB Chat. Thanks for listening.